Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Don't Throw Your Money Away, 10 Things You Need to Know About Cybersecurity Managed Services. My name is Michelle Ulrich, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at LinkSource Technologies, and I'll be your host today. So as I said before we get started with the webinar, you can always press *6 to mute yourself so that you don't have any background noise when we're recording the call here today, so we'd appreciate that. If you want to unmute yourself, you can press *7, and either one will be fine. You can always I'm going to put these in the chat so you have those available as well. And if anybody has any quick questions before we get started, again, you can put those into chat. Whoops, *7 is to unmute. *7. All right, so let's get started. Again, welcome everyone to today's webinar. First of all, we're going to get started with who is Vigilant Technology Solutions. They're one of our presenters today, and they were founded in 2009. They're located across the country in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm not going to read everything here on the slide, as you can read for yourselves, but the big thing here to focus on is the customers that they serve. 100 law firms, top accounting firms, manufacturing, government, which a lot of clients are coming to us in the government sector today to talk about cybersecurity. And then, as you can see, also law enforcement. So those two areas, and including healthcare, are some of the top companies and organizations that we're working with today. The primary product that Vigilant Technology Solutions has available is called CyberDNA, and it's a network security monitoring service, patent pending, and it's invisible to hackers. So we're not going to really get into a deep dive of the product today. If you do have questions, you can certainly ask those in the chat or during the Q&A session at the end. But really, we're just going to obviously talk about cybersecurity managed services today and the questions that you might have. And with further ado, let's go ahead and introduce Chris Nyhuis. He is the owner and the founder of Vigilant Technology Solutions. So welcome, Chris. I'm happy to have you here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michelle, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate you spending some of your day. I'm sure all of you are very busy, and it means a lot to us that you would spend part of your day with us. Myself, I've been in IT and security for 18 years now. The majority of my career prior to founding Vigilant was spent in the automotive industry for half of that, and then before that was in the food supply chain world, working with money control systems and protecting those environments and the networks that comprise those systems. I am a member of InfraGard. I speak across the United States. My passion is to really change a lot of the way that the industry is looking at security and start to really answer that question of, if the things we've been doing for a long time now are working, then why are we starting to see so many attacks? And ultimately, why are we starting to see these attacks that are undetected for months and months and months on end inside organizations' environments? Very passionate about orphan care, information security, love hanging out with my family and hiking around. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Chris, and we're very excited to have you here today. We know you've got a lot of information in your brain to share with us about this topic, so I appreciate it. Next, we're going to talk about LinkSource. LinkSource Technologies is the company that I work for, and it was founded in 1998. We're located in Roseville, California. So that's more on the Pacific side. We work with a lot of clients on the telecom side of the business and really the managed services that go around that. And we started working with Vigilant Technology Solutions back in 2015 because we really felt that our clients with a lot of the cloud and VPN and a lot of different things were going more toward the cloud, that clients were beginning to ask us more about the security of that. And so we started reaching out to some different companies, and Vigilant Technology Solutions had a really great product that we were excited about, and and we'd love to share that with our clients. So we had a lot of similar interests in that regard. So that is us today. And with that, we brought in Stephanie Cervantes. She is our security and privacy strategist at LinkSource Technologies. And I'm going to let her introduce herself because she's got a lot of great experience spanning over 20 years, and she's just an amazing resource for us with our clients. So Stephanie, would you care to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks, Michelle. I'm happy to join you and Chris today in talking about one of my favorite subjects, information security, and trying to find the solutions there. As you can see, I've spent over 20 years in the privacy and security realms of California state government. Upon retiring, came to work for LinkSource Technologies in Roseville, and am enjoying it now, seeing it from the private sector side. So I have been in your shoes for many of you as purchasers, procurers of security services, and done all of that. So it's nice to see it from this other side. You can see I, too, am very involved in InfraGard, founding member and current board member for the Sacramento chapter, which is a private public sector alliance with the FBI for critical infrastructure. I'm the founder and chair for the State Interagency Security Group, and chaired that until my retirement. I've done everything from being a chief information security officer to managing technical security on large enterprise research projects to very large ones for the state of California, quality assurance, and then finished up my career managing the IT security at California Department of Justice, where I also had oversight for the CLETS, the law enforcement section of the network. So I'm very happy to join everyone here today, and I hope it's going to be a really good topic and you'll learn a lot.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. You've got quite the experience there, so we're excited to have you both today. So 10 things you need to know about cybersecurity managed services. Stephanie and Chris are going to spend the next hour sharing their expertise and knowledge with you on cybersecurity managed services and how they're not all created equal, why security as a service, or SaaS, doesn't always work. And then, of course, you'll learn the top 10 things you need to know about cybersecurity managed services. And at the end, we will also have top 10 questions. And if you'd like to get a copy of these top 10 questions, we would love to send them to you. You can send an email to me at marketing@linksource.com and just put in the subject line top 10 questions, and I'll be happy to send that right over. So that's going to be at the end of the presentation. I'll again go over how to get that document and how we can email that to you. So let's get right in. Let's dive in here today. We've got a lot to cover in the next hour. So let's ask this number one question: why you need a cybersecurity managed service? And Stephanie, you've got such a long career in the public sector, and as you just mentioned a few moments ago, you were a procurer of IT services and security solutions. Could you have used a managed security service when you were Department of Justice and some of these other organizations, and why would you need a managed security service?
That's a really good question, Michelle. I definitely would have put my security dollars into one of the newer managed security services. And even when I had the largest security staff, my key people spent most of their days in meetings, not watching all of the network logs. And so even when it was just me and my staff of me, I had to rely on the IT shop to watch the logs. And we all know that doesn't happen, that everyone doesn't have 8 hours a day to look at logs, to detect traffic anomalies, and find those breadcrumbs that hackers typically will lay if you're looking for them when they're constructing a hack. So, typically my staff had other things that they did, and they couldn't watch the traffic 24/7. We weren't staffed round the clock in most of the departments that I was in, and so you have a lot of downtime. So definitely having a managed cybersecurity service to watch the logs would be great. A lot of times we face the dilemma of trying to put in tools to monitor the network, but we had to weigh that against the liability of creating liability for the agency, the department, because if we didn't have staff monitoring those logs, we weren't really doing our due diligence. And in a lot of instances when we tried to put in a large log management system and you had 2 or 3 people, maybe primarily one, that would take typically 5 to 6 people to handle, it wasn't worth doing it because, again, as I said, you would create liability for the department. So any place that I've been, I could have definitely used one, even when I had a highly skilled staff to when, again, it was just me. And primarily that's because highly skilled security staff are hard to recruit, train, and retain, and they're very expensive.
Yes. Well, those are great points, and it would also be peace of mind, I would imagine, that especially if it's you yourself and no one else. So great. Thank you so much for that explanation. So let's go on to the next slide. We've got cybersecurity managed service versus SaaS models of old. Chris, I'm going to ask you what the difference of these are. I don't really know, and I think a lot of our people on the call probably don't either, and I think this would be very helpful to understand. Can you speak to this?
Sure, absolutely. And it's a great question. The answer to this really comes down to value. If you look at the history of hacking, attempts over the last 20 years, you started having people attacking people, and then the industry said, well, and then those people that were attacking you said, well, I can maximize my value, my time, by automating, right, what I do. So they started attacking in an automated fashion. The industry said, well, if they're going to attack in automated fashion, let's go ahead and build our model around detecting their automated scripts and their attacks and their approaches, which worked for a while until attackers realized that the value of them creating just those scripts wasn't working very well. So then they decided, well, let's add people back into the equation and then attack that way. And the industry was already down this path of automation, and it's very hard to change an industry once it's down a path, right? Because there's a lot of companies build their entire models around that, and it's continued to go down that path, and then it turned into the SaaS model, which in reality was really just, if you look at it, is a productized route, disguised as a service, right? So they're taking those products that they were selling, or the appliances that they were selling, and then moved it into more of a cloud offering. So you're still buying the same solution, it's just in the cloud, but with the same flaws in it that were causing things to be missed, right? Mm-hmm. The value there is, is different when you go to a managed security service model, because the value is moving back towards that technology plus people approach. Because you have people attacking you, you need to have people that are watching your infrastructure as well. So that when the preventative measures like a firewall or intrusion prevention system or those things fail, then there's something to be able to detect their failure and then be able to help you very quickly modify those prevention methods, very quickly get the attacker out and move on. So there's value in that managed service model because you have a much higher detection rate, you have a much higher ability to find threats quicker, and as Stephanie said a few minutes ago, you don't have to have very highly advanced engineers on your team that on your direct team that are going to get pulled into other areas. You're having people that are always focused on that end goal of finding that threat within your environment. So the first benefit there is back to that value. You have, in the SaaS model, you still have to have people on your staff that are going to get pulled in other directions. In the managed model, you're able to have people that are focused and directly integrated into what's going on. The second part there is really one of silos. When we work with a lot of local and state government in California and across the United States, one of the things that happens when you're dealing with threats is you're all using the same software sometimes. You have the same state-centric websites that you have to visit. And when a vulnerability shows up in one of those realms, if your situational awareness, that eyes on glass, hands on boots on the ground team is siloed to just your infrastructure, then you might not know that something just happened at a county, 2 counties over, or a law enforcement agent on the other side of town, or a water district in Northern California. You might not know that information or that threat happened 2 minutes ago, and it's against the same equipment that you use as well, and you might have an impending threat coming soon. So by having a managed solution, that information, that knowledge sharing is able to happen on the back end and is able to really attack those threats and be very, very proactive, which is very different from the SaaS model, which is a very reactive approach to it. So, managed gets you well ahead of threats and well ahead of an attacker.
Right. Thank you so much for that explanation. I feel like I have a little more understanding about that topic. So, well, that leads into our next slide perfectly, because not all cybersecurity managed services are created equal. And so, Stephanie, maybe you can pick this one up and tell us maybe what the differences are in, some, more of the differences, and why you would pick one over another. There are so many different companies out there, it might be a little bit hard to pick out which would be the best.
Well, as Chris just outlined, the new managed services for security are not the SaaS models of old, but there are still some that are out there doing the same old SaaS model that we all hated. It's now cybersecurity managed services. That is, the latest buzzword of the must-haves in all of the InfoSec community. You read it in any of the trade magazines, all of that. But some of them, as I said, have just simply rebranded a log monitoring service as a managed service, security service. Some of the next-gen security companies have added on to their current services by acquiring companies and then repackaging them to sell to their existing customers. You may have one of their new technologies that was the IT product 4 or 5 years ago, and now they've moved into the managed services side and rebranded it, told you it's very easy, let's just up your annual maintenance fee, and now you can have all of this stuff. But you really need to look to see what you're getting, because they're not all created equal. And you need to first define what you want from one. Do you want someone that just takes a look at your logs and tells you, hey, you've got a problem, go and take a look here, and still requires your staff or your IT staff to do all of the legwork, track it down, find the box, find the offending machine, whatever, and then do the remediation? Or do you want a team that will help work with you, that will say, hey, you have a problem, you're starting this box located on this portion of the network at this IP, running this version of iOS, and this flavor is doing this. You need to shut it down, track it down immediately. Or, hey, your team, all of a sudden you've started to phone to an Eastern European address where you've never done business there before. Do you want something like that, or do you want someone to say, hey, it looks like you might be having a lot of external traffic going out to outside of the U.S. Is that normal? And then you have to figure out where it is and what box. So again, some will only identify a potential threat, call you to track it down, find out, which in my mind is nothing more than what you could have found on your own logs. So why are you paying them all the money to do that? Some companies, once they help to figure it out, they leave the remediation up to you and your team, and they're not available to walk with you and your team through any incident. Or if they are, they will charge you an arm and a leg, so there goes the discount on bundling it all up. Some of them only rely on known threats and vulnerabilities and automated alerts, so they're still kind of behind the curve. They're nothing more than the current the malware stuff and threat info that you're currently or should be getting. Do you need someone to walk through it with you? Do you need someone as an extension of your team? Or are you okay with somebody just having them talk to you? If you do have an incident, do you have to pay extra for forensics? Has the company or the managed service that you picked, do they have connections with law enforcement? Do they work with them regularly? Do they know how to preserve digital evidence and forensic trails so that in the event that you have to go to court or prosecute, that you have that? So those are all the questions that you need to be looking at. They aren't always created equal.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. That really is eye-opening. So let's take a look at a little bit more in depth of what you'd need to look for in a cybersecurity managed service. And Chris, this one I think is for you, and if you can explain this a little bit more in detail, that would be great. Maybe I don't know if Chris is on.
Oh, there you go. Okay, got it.
Okay.
I was just saying that it's a great segue from what Stephanie was just talking about. She made some really great points about what differentiates. I mean, even like what she was saying about resellers. You got to be really careful. For an organization that might just be offloading another technology or offloading logs from your firewalls or things like that, because security in today's world, I mean, you have very malleable attackers that are out there. They're able to change on a dime. Most of these attackers have already tested their ability to attack you before they even enter your environment, before they even start their attack. And that's because everything's been commoditized. Every firewall that every one of us has in our infrastructures can be purchased on eBay. Every antivirus solution that's out there, you can upload to multiple websites on the internet to test malware against. And if they're readily available to you, they're also readily available to the rest of the other side of the coin there, the attackers. And so what they're doing is they're testing their malware continuously. And you need to make sure that as malleable as they are, your technology that's defending you has to be malleable as well. And so, which means that the analysts that are doing analysis in your environment have to have the situational authority to be able to modify the tools they're using to do detection in your infrastructure on the fly, so they can dig deep into something that just changed 35 seconds ago. You don't have the time. Attacks happen so fast that if you're waiting, 6 or 7 months for a product update, to enable better detection, it just doesn't fit the bill anymore. And that's where managed service comes into play. But to dig a little deeper into that, what are the things you should be looking for? So the first one is look for providers who have a long-haul mindset with your customers. Security is a very done well is a custom thing. Every organization is different. You have different people, you have different methods, you have different ways of doing things. There are a lot of companies popping up all over the place doing security now. But one of the things that's important is you want to make sure that that provider is going to be around for a long time. What is that focus for that organization? Are they looking to sell off pretty soon, to somebody else, or are do they have more of this long haul relationship mindset with you? Are they willing to take the time to really get to know you well? Because the more they get to know you, the better and better detection gets. The thing with that to note is, if you look at some of the organizations out there that, when an organization does get purchased, their service and solutions really do diminish over time. You can see a lot of the purchases that have happened over the last year. The other thing is you want to find a provider that puts customer retention first. So I am less impressed with an organization that says that how much they've grown from a customer-based standpoint, who leads with that, and more impressed with an organization that says, here's how many customers we've retained. Because that's really it doesn't matter to me how much an organization has grown. It matters to me more how much an organization has retained. And the reason I say that is if you have a retention mindset, you're going to grow better. You're going to grow really well and really fast as well. But if you're focused on just growth, then in the security world, you could potentially take on customers that could affect your ability to serve the existing customer base and protect them. And so be really careful when you're looking at that. The other thing is look for providers that stress the importance of skilled analysts in addition to technology. Be very wary of organizations that are leading just with technology. There's a lot of organizations that are popping out and saying buzzwords like artificial intelligence or new algorithms or things like that. Security, what they're basically doing is rebranding the same thing the industry's been doing for 7 to 8 years. You got to be careful of the marketing fluff, and you got to really see, when you're looking at these providers, that do they have a balance of people and technology, and that there are decisions being made within the organization to wrap the detection around that. Another one is ask your security provider how they vet their employees. There's a lot of security providers that will send the analysis of your technology overseas. Does that fit your model? Does that analyst have analysts here in the United States? And if you look at a lot of the other countries, Russia, for instance, Russia will not allow a lot of the organizations within Russia to even work with detection or security companies outside of Russia's borders. But here in the United States, we do that all the time. And one of the things with the security providers, they're going to have a lot of insight, a lot of visibility within your organization. And are you okay with that being sent outside of the United States or into countries where they can't do heavy background checks? Do they do DOJ background checks on all of their team members? What security clearances do your teams have that are watching your environment? And a good litmus test for me when I look at organizations is, I like to see that their analysts have higher levels of clearance or security than are actually needed to take care of the customer base that they primarily have. Because then you know that those people have been vetted better than what you need them to be, and you also know that they understand the protocols needed to protect your data. Another one is, and this is a big one, this is a big pet peeve of mine. You have security detection companies that will come in, become part of your team, they'll detect your environment, but when it comes to incident response, they want to charge you more. And it's my belief that if you're teaming up with an organization to protect them from a detection standpoint and find bad things in their infrastructure, then you better be willing to cover that network forensics and incident response as part of your service with no additional cost. There's a lot of organizations that are out there that are charging $500 to $1,000 an hour to do incident response in addition to the detection they're already doing. If you're doing detection well enough, you should already have that data. You should already be doing forensics, and you should be able to provide that for the customer at no additional cost to back up the services that you're providing.
Wow, that's a lot, Chris. I really appreciate that, and I think our viewers who are tuning in today as well will certainly want to listen to this again. So everyone, just let you know this is being recorded. So thank you again, Chris. That was quite a lot, and I appreciate it. So let's get into some of the name brands, and why they're not all the same. Stephanie, would you recommend adding a managed service from an existing security vendor whose products you already use?
That's an excellent question, Michelle, and I would say not necessarily. While the convenience might be there, many of them, again, as I mentioned earlier, will offer to up your annual maintenance fee to include the managed service. So sometimes from, a procurement standpoint, it's kind of the easiest thing to do, but it's not always the best thing to do when picking a managed security service for your environment. So because you may not be getting all that you need, and you may end up actually overpaying for what you're getting. It may not be everything that you're looking for. So again, it comes back to needing to know what you need and what's best for your company, and not going with what's just convenient. As Chris just outlined, the services part of a managed service can be quite different. You look at companies that are on the cutting edge, and perhaps not the bleeding edge, but they're newer. They may not be on the Gartner Magic Quadrant. They may provide better services for you at a lower cost than those that are part of companies from the next gen technologies. It's really all about the service and the compliance requirements that they meet and how they meet the needs that you have for your infrastructure. So you need to ask those questions. One of the biggest things that I'm seeing, and I've learned over my years in security, is that sometimes you'll have a great newer company that is out there that's not on a Magic Quadrant. You stumble across them. You try and poke holes at the technology. You talk to their engineers. They seem solid. You put them in, and the next year, 2 years later, they're the next it company. So again, look for some of those smaller companies. Don't just rely on the Magic Quadrant, and don't be fooled by a large company that has a great sales team, that has great salespeople, and a not so great product, and then dismiss the small company with the great product that has the not so polished sales team.
Like finding a diamond in the rough.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's great. Well, moving on to number 6, and we just talked a little bit about the Magic Quadrant. Why the Magic Quadrant isn't the best way to vet cybersecurity companies. And, Chris, as I said, Stephanie just mentioned this, and, many companies are using things like the Gartner's Magic Quadrant or other research companies' reviews in selecting products for their network. And, why is this not always the best way to pick a company?
Right. So, and that's another great question. I really like these questions. So the thing with this approach is really that back to challenging the status quo. And it's really the question I believe has to be asked is, if all of these best-in-class solutions are working all the time, then why are, I believe, every organization is going to be hacked no matter what you use. It will happen. The question is, how fast are you finding that attack along the progress of that attack and stopping it, making changes to your environment, and moving on, right? So my question that I'm asking back to the industry, and I think everyone needs to start asking this question, is if all of these best-in-class things are working, then why are all these companies getting hacked and having to go unnoticed for months and months and months. You know, I mean, if you look at some of the major attacks that came out for organizations that have more money to throw at security than anyone, you know, attackers have been in their environment for 8 years or 8 months plus. You know, Dropbox just came out 2 weeks ago and said that a hack happened in 2012 in their infrastructure, an incident, and they're just now able to release information, you know, on what happened. And they've been trying to figure this out for that long. Organizations should be able to figure out much earlier. And so my response to that question is, you know, when we look at, you know, the solutions that are out there in a lot of the awards and a lot of the, you know, the quadrants and things like that, as a consumer myself back in 2009, I started to look at what is the criteria for these organizations to be chosen. You know, a lot of times just even get on the list, you've got to pay that organization a lot of money. Or maybe there's, you know, a lot of the criteria that would exclude, you know, organizations that, you know, I would want to work with, for instance, you know, or, you know, just even the, you know, there's some of the more quadrant-based approaches, which, you know, around 80%, you know, of some of the things that they ask for have nothing to do with the service. So, and there are more requirements on, you know, how big is the company, or how many international employees do you have, or how many countries are you in. What I'm more concerned with as a consumer is, you know, how does the service actually work? You know, is it really going to provide for me what I need? And so when I'm looking at these research companies, I start first. I look last at what they're telling me, and I vet out the research company first. No matter how big they are, I look at what does it take to get on that list. And once I know that, then I know how valid is it going to be for me. You know, there's a saying that a lot of people that I've talked to from time to time will say, and they'll say, well, no one ever got fired for using Cisco, right? Well, that's different. You know, now we're starting to see that whole trend is changing. And so what I challenge, you know, decision makers to do is to really focus on, you know, the solutions themselves, or even the choosing criteria for a lot of these awards, because you'll be very surprised when you start looking at some of the way that these companies get chosen. It tends to be more with, you know, how much money they're paying into some of these things than actually if it really differentiates. And there are a significant amount of solutions out there that do not fit the criteria for some of these awards that will blow the socks off of the solutions inside of them.
Wow. Yeah, well, definitely vet out your cybersecurity companies and who they're getting their qualifications and awards from. So thanks again, Chris. That was very informative. Now we get into attacks. So number 7 today, number 7 question is expect attacks, because as Chris just said, everybody's going to get hacked at some point. And so now we're going to get into, you know, why best of breed solutions don't actually prevent attacks. And I think we've touched on a little bit of this. But Stephanie, can you touch on, you know, why they're not always the best security solutions?
Certainly. As we've discussed, it's not if, but when you'll be attacked, and then how quickly you recognize it and mitigate the risk or the breach. So many of the companies that have been breached, as Chris mentioned, have had best-of-breed technology. They have had a lot of money to throw at security solutions. They've got things in place. They meet all of the compliance checks, and they've still been hacked. And the breach still occurred. So many, what we found in dealing and looking at a lot of the managed services is that many of the next-gen security solutions have faulty patches or firmware that's embedded with malware. And if you're not looking, you're not going to detect it, and that's all that much longer that you will be open and susceptible to a breach. And so what you need to do, it's only with that continuous monitoring. It's only with knowing really what's normal for your network and what's not. Working with highly skilled analysts who know your environment, that can go back and trace or see those breadcrumbs that I talked about earlier that hackers lay prior to an attack. If they can figure that out and see that, they track the patterns, they call those out, they can put them together and assemble them to detect attacks. So if they know your environment and all of a sudden you start having abnormal traffic that might be normal to a next-gen technology, but they know that you don't regularly do business with these certain IP addresses, and they call you and say, hey, have you changed your business model? Do you have a new partner? And only then is it quicker remediation to stop that. So basically, you can't rely on the standard log alerts or even the malware updates of known attacks to keep you safe and reduce your exposure. It's that intimate knowledge of your network, what's normal for your business, and being able to detect those things quickly to fix, reduce, mitigate the breach and the risk and the exposure.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Stephanie. One thing that comes to mind is there's a great quote by Robert Mueller. He was the FBI director, I believe, and he said there are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be. So it's a great topic that we're discussing today. And so without further ado, let's go on to number 8. So number 8, SIEM plus logs equals alerts. That's all well and good, but who's watching your network 24/7? So Chris, I'm going to throw this over to you and ask you why it's so important for your network to be monitored 24/7 around the clock.
Right. No, absolutely. And there's 2 more questions or answer to that. So the first one is, security itself and attacks that are advanced, they happen over time. There's a lot of things that come together. There's footprinting your network. They're trying to figure out what firewalls you're using from the outside. They're spinning up attacks, and they're moving through your infrastructure in different ways. Maybe they're coming in through a laptop that was at Starbucks that day, or et cetera. There's all kinds of different ways. And what you have to do over time is you have to be able to piece all of those little forensic pieces together and be able to comprise them into a much larger attack. And so it's very important to have continuous visibility into your infrastructure. There are a lot of companies that will come out and do vulnerability assessments, and you'll clean those up, and you clean those problems up, and then they'll do it again. You'll do those, and it's this continual process of updating or fixing security problems within your infrastructure. But those are only moment in time instances, or when someone's not watching all the time, or have the ability to correlate that data from over time, then you're not able to really see those things as those attacks as they're progressing through. The other thing that's very interesting is there's a huge trend for SIEM solutions and logs. It tends to be right now, the focus for a lot of organizations. You got things like Splunk and other collection systems out there. But the thing that these solutions they have a huge Achilles heel, and the Achilles heel for them is that they can only alert or give you a visibility into information that it's collected. And one of the first things an attacker does when they get on a system is they change the logging capability so that the logs don't report on them. They don't turn it off. They just stop it logging on them. So no one notices that logs, anything different, because logs aren't coming, or logs are still coming from those devices. But they're not able to notice that something's actually changed. And so logs are actually, in my opinion, I consider them to be a secondary means of detection. And they're actually, from the moment you turn them on, they're untrusted. because the moment you turn up a new logging system, you don't know if sometime in the past someone's already gotten on that system and already changed the logging capabilities. So SIEMs, from the moment they turn on, are untrusted. And it's the same way for firewalls and even antivirus, because all of them have that same Achilles heel. When you're looking at a firewall, for instance, which is a susceptible device that someone can attack on the outside of your network because it has an IP address, if they take over that device, they're going to be able to have unrestricted access in your infrastructure and not have any monitoring or logging on them at all. So when you're doing investigations, a lot of that expense is sifting through these logs, only to find that there's nothing there, and that's a big deal. So so what you really need to have is to be able to focus and collect data outside of these individual pieces and be able to have a trusted data set in your infrastructure that all the other things can be compared against, like your SIEM logs or your firewall logs or your antivirus. And then that way, by comparing those against that trusted data set, you're able to then verify that those individual things that you're receiving data from are actually trusted. And that's why it's important to do this, to approach it from a visibility standpoint 24/7 and be able to collect that data, because you're creating this trusted data set that's independent, it's invisible to attacks, and you can know that it's going to be the core of your entire infrastructure, that all the other things you're doing from a preventative measure can be compared against.
Great. Thank you so much for explaining that. So let's move on. A lot of people, obviously with everything that you've talked about, you and Stephanie, money is, certainly an issue. Budget can be an issue. So, making sure that you're not throwing your money away. We've answered a lot of questions today about, what to look for to help mitigate that. But, why? So let's kind of get into the money aspect here. So, how do you know you're getting what you need without paying too much? Stephanie, would you be able to chime in on this one?
Oh, certainly. Going back to what Chris outlined about the differences in the managed security services, again, you need to know what you have to comply with, what your regulatory compliance requirements are. You need to know what type of assistance your security and your network teams, or perhaps just you, need. Know the risk tolerance for your executive directors, your city managers, your CEOs, your board of directors, your member boards, any of those. And then write out your requirements for the managed security services. A lot of times people just fall for the big box names, and they think that that's the way to go. But again, as we mentioned, it used to be that you didn't get fired for putting in some of the brand names, but that's no longer true, especially with security. And so once you have those out, you have your requirements outlined, then look kind of outside of that quadrant box, those quadrant boxes. Talk to the various security companies, research them, or find a company that will already do that for you, so that they bring you kind of the best in breed things for your environment. And then, do demos, do proof of concepts or bake-offs on some of those things to find out what meets your needs. And again, this can be tricky, so you may need an outside company that is agnostic, that can pull that all together for you, that can, take the requirements of your network, your company, and say, with what you're telling me, these are the companies that I would look for or look at for this. And then, again, don't fall for a bad product sold by a good salesperson. Reach out for help with the vetting of that, and I think you're going to be surprised, because I, in the past, have found many companies that were at the beginning of their early sales life, and they were, in the back realms of the huge mega conferences like RSA in San Francisco. And, 3-4 years later, you find them with these humongous booths in the very front. But if you look for some of those companies that are outside the quadrant, you know what your requirements are. You can get great products at good prices with services that you will be very appreciative of, and that will help you mitigate, again, those risks and get those compliance boxes that we all have to go through checked off.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Stephanie. It's quite a fire hose with all of this information, so I'm sure everybody's head spinning at this moment. So let's go on to we have a list of, obviously we've gone over many questions already, but we wanted to present some top 10 questions to ask a cybersecurity managed service provider. And Stephanie and Chris, I'd really like for you to just, if you could, we've got our top 10. Chris, if you want to take the top 5 and just go over what those are. Again, everybody, we're not going to answer every single one of these questions today. We'll get into, just in a few moments. We have, about 7 minutes left, and so I want to be mindful of the time, but we will open up for Q&A. And then if we don't get to anybody's, questions, feel free to email me at marketing@linksource.com. I would be happy to pass on your questions to either Chris or Stephanie to get those answered for you offline if you choose. But let's get into these questions. Chris, can you take the top 5 and just rattle them off here for us? And then Stephanie, you can take the bottom 5. Maybe we lost Chris again. Maybe he's on mute.
Yeah, he keeps muting me there.
Okay.
Did you say you wanted to go over the questions from people in the webinar first?
Let's actually go. Let's just list off the first 5 questions, and then we'll open up to Q&A.
Okay, got it. I don't do it.
If you don't have your notes, I can.
Yeah, I apologize. It's not on. It's not on there. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I'll go ahead and take those. So there's 10 questions here, and so the first one is: does the managed security service meet all of your compliance standards? Good question to ask anybody in this realm, so that you have better understanding of what your compliance. Second is: does the managed security services have DOJ approval? Or do they have that clearance? Third one, do you need a U.S.-based company that keeps the metadata within the United States? Some companies go outside of the United States, from what I understand, and if you need to have your data kept within the bounds of the United States, this is a great question for you to ask. Number 4, do you need to keep your data out of the shared cloud? So again, if you need to keep that very private, then again, this is a good question for you. Number 5, do the security analysts need to have high security clearances? So again, great question. Stephanie, if you want to jump in here, or Chris.
Can I say one more thing about that cloud part?
Mm-hmm.
Is that one thing you really need to be careful of in today's world is that cloud question. I think the questions that we're asking here are things that will help you to arm you to really vet out and get through a lot of the marketing fluff. And one of the things that we asked all the time by local and state government and law enforcement agencies is, where's my data going to be stored? It's staying here, right? The thing you really have to be careful with is that the majority of the managed service providers out there are actually storing your threat data in the cloud. And the cloud is not a very secure place at all. You can see that with just, again, what happened with Dropbox recently. And so you really want to ask that question, where is my threat data going to be stored, especially in, being local, state government, and law enforcement. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, Chris, for chiming in on that one. Stephanie, do you want to chime in here with some of the other questions we have?
Sure. Number 6 question you may want to ask. Do the security analysts from the managed services security company, do they need to be U.S. citizens? Are they U.S. citizens, or are you okay with having them offshore and non-U.S. citizens, or even working for a U.S. company and not being a U.S. citizen? Is that one of your compliance requirements? Number 7, do you want the same team of analysts assigned to your account, or are you comfortable with having different analysts on rotation? Many of the managed services companies out there have a large pool of analysts, and they continually rotate. So you may not get the same person each and every time you call with a question, or they call you. So, you need to decide, is that important to you for continuity, for consistency, for team training, for relational, knowing that, yes, this is who you can trust. We've worked with them before, and they always are spot on. They always give us the right threat and the current information. So moving on to number 8, does the managed security service show you all the devices and hardware on your network, along with all of the operating system and patch levels that are currently running? Is that something you need to have to do your annual reports that you have to do for compliance? That was one of the big things that I had difficulty with, and so did our IT shops in the state, working to get that annual device accounting. So is that important to you, or is it just a nice to have? Number 9, once a threat is identified, would the managed service security work with you and your team to remediate it, or are you on your own? And can you just ask them questions? Or are they going to be there step by step, and will they charge you for it? Number 10, does the security analyst that assists you and your team with incident response, forensics, and work with law enforcement, as well as how to send data to other vendors, do they know how to do this? Will they work with you if you find something? Will they help you with the forensics? Do they know how to tell you to notify one of the software security companies that their patch is faulty, or you've just detected an issue with the firmware, and will they work with you? So again, number 10, does the security analyst assist you and your team with incident response, forensics, and work with you with law enforcement, as well as how to send data to other vendors on software patches?
Those are great questions. And again, if anybody wants a list of those questions, please email me at marketing@linksource.com. I would be happy to send that list to you. If you would like more detailed information, right now would be a great time to ask our experts on the panel any specific questions that you might have. You can press *7 to unmute yourself, and it sounds like we may have some that are unmuting themselves at this point. So feel free again to ask any questions you have right now, or if you're shy, you can put it into the chat and I'll ask them for you. So anybody have any questions, feel free to ask away. And if not, that's okay too. I do hear some background noise, so if you aren't asking, you can mute yourself by pressing *6. Okay. Maybe we've got some shy ones today. Okay, well, we are at the top of the hour, so if there aren't any questions, that's fine. If you want to ask afterwards or you want to learn more, a couple of things just to let you know. We will be at MESAC in October. On October 9th, we will have a booth, and we will be offering a time to talk with somebody that can answer your questions specifically. If you happen to be going to MESAC, we'll be offering a free demo with Vigilant. So if you do want to check out what they have at that time, you can ask any questions of Chris and his team, and they'd be happy to answer those questions for you. Also, they're presenting at MESAC as well a great presentation called Hacking the Paradigm. That is actually a really great presentation. It dives really deep into some of these areas that we touched on today, and that's going to be on October 10th at 10:20 in the morning, which is track B, again at MESAC. Again, outside of MESAC, if you are not attending, this has nothing to do with you. We do have plenty of opportunity to schedule an appointment to meet with you one-on-one. You can give us a call. You can send an email, again, to marketing@linksource.com. You can go to either of our websites that are viewed on the screen today, and feel free to reach out to us and just let us know, what your needs are and what questions you have to ask. We'd be very happy to answer those. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Stephanie and Chris, for sharing that great information. It was really informative for me as well. So again, everybody, I hope you have a great day, and thanks again for tuning in.